Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah, so I've heard talks and whispers all my life about the mountain feral people.
You want me to record a message to tell you why I think feral people are so dangerous. So, there's a couple of factors here, all right? First, they know the forests and the national parks and the valleys and the mountains better than we do. They live there, that's their home, that's their hunting ground. Second one, they know how to hunt. They know stealth, they know how to trap, they know how to sneak up on things without making a single sound, and it factors into the whole stealth thing. So there's a number of reasons why these things are so dangerous, and plus, people don't really believe in them. You know, and when there's no belief, there's a lot more they can do because people aren't really looking for them.
A lot of these feral people that are supposedly seen in the Smoky Mountain area of the Appalachian Mountains are supposed to be people who have painted themselves blue. It is thought that a lot of these feral people are maybe descended from these type of people that came over years and years ago back with the Scottish and Celtic people. Some of them decided to go feral that way and become very much like their ancestors. So there's an old saying in the mountains that when the blue people show up, it's time to leave. That's an interesting thing that some of the mountain people will tell you. So they're a bad lot to run into. It might definitely be a good idea to vacate that area as soon as possible. I will agree with what the old timers say. If the blue people show up, then it's probably time to leave.
The feral people that I've heard around here are usually the ones that go in and live off-grid. Forest rangers will go in, find an encampment somewhere out in the middle of the wilderness. They usually don't find people around, and then they'll tear it down. Yeah, those are the ones that I've heard. Most of them I've heard have been down south, where there's been generations of people living back in the woods that, you know, there's legends about them.
Okay, the only encounter I have is like out here on Pigeon Mountain where I'm doing my research. All of a sudden I heard this human voice type yell thing. Kind of like a battle cry, you know, like, "Ah!"
My creatures of the night, once again. Wait, no, this isn't Midnight Lycanthropy. This is Camp Nightmare Fuel. Of course, with my co-host and co-founder, Miss Barb Hartman, as well as our sidekick, Bigfoot's Barbershop, aka Mr. Barber. And then, yes, we do have a member of the Midnight Society science team joining us tonight. Of course, I am referring to Mr. Prevo from Monstrous the Podcast. We are going to be diving into some very infamous, nefarious, yes, terrifying encounters and reasonings why we either support, disagree, or also come to conclusions as to why feral people are a massive issue as to what's occurring with missing people within the national forest. Yet first, we must see how our sidekicks are doing tonight. Mr. Prevo, my friend, starting with you. How are you doing tonight? Followed by Mr. Barber, and then, of course, Miss Hartman.
I'm doing fantastic as always, and happy to be here, Kenny, Barb, and Brian. I hope everybody's doing well. Brian, how are you?
Doing well, my friend. Lots of good stuff coming. Does that work the same way for you, Barb? Does the fall get busier?
Well, we'll have to see, because it's been pretty busy out here on the Olympic Peninsula. It's been really, they've been here, but seems to be more quiet back at home in Pierce County. So, yeah, we'll see. Guys, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. This is absolutely awesome. Good to hear everyone's keeping that good old morale up. Yet, we got some dark stuff that we need to attend to at the moment. I will start this all off. And then, of course, we are going to toss the mic back and forth. And we're going to try, in a 45-minute time frame, give or take, figure out what the heck is occurring here. If anybody has questions, feel free to contact any of us. Leave comments. First off, to everybody out there, if you do not realize yet, every year in the national parks of North America, an estimated 1,100 to 2,400 people just vanish. Boom. Peace out. Only 5% of these people are ever found. The real question is who or what is taking these people. I recently have been spending a ton of time with Apple Analytics, also some other really smart number crunchers. We went through areas where there's reported feral people sightings. We went through areas where people are missing, where there's cave systems, national parks, and we just ran this through Apple Analytics over and over again. The numbers that came back are terrifying, yet really make a lot of sense here. Keep in mind, feral people or persons, there are hotspots, starting with the Appalachians, the Appalachian Mountains, the Smoky Mountains, the Catalachie National Forest, Mount Shasta, the Everglades, the Catskill Mountains, and of course, Washington State National Forests. Yikes. This pie graph in analytics was made off of course, 100%. We ran these numbers over and over again, starting with 35% going to feral people, 29% going to misfortune, meaning whether or not you step down into what we've spoken about before, these huge crevices that are covered up with small amounts of brush. And if you tumble all the way down into there, even if they do have dogs trying to find you, the odds are they're going to lose that trail depending how deep you are down into this cave. And also, if they don't even see where you fell through and it's covered back up again, that's going to mask your smell even more. Criminals at 11%. Yes, we all know that people are going to head off to national forests and areas that are remote, just like the rest of us, to spend time and be isolated. When you go out there, we all like to think that this is just some perfect adventure. It's not how it goes. There's people out there that do have issues and that are also partaking in things that are against the law. Natural predators, 10%. Cryptids, 8%. Extraterrestrial, 7%. Yes, which ties into what I've stated before numerous times of how I do not really feel that cryptids nor extraterrestrials have a lot to do with what's occurring. One of the most infamous cases involved Dennis Martin. Think for a second. What did our ancestors wear for clothing? They wore wolf skins, bear skins, and animal skins. We all know also that people are horrible at distances with size relation to what's actually occurring. Numerous tests when people claim they saw large black cats, they put out little cutouts that were the size of a normal house cat. Everybody got the distance incorrect. From 20 yards away or so, I would say a good percentage of anyone out there seeing a man, maybe the size of Mr. Barber, wearing a bear skin. He's got bear boots on, so this skin drops down where you're not seeing human skin at all. So it looks like now you have human-like legs carrying this boy off into the forest. Same thing with wolf skins. When people are claiming that this wolf creature looked as if it was having human-like legs. Interesting. Teddy Roosevelt, there's a lot of things stating that he had quite an understanding of these feral people being in the national parks, which is why he created these areas to really try to distance society from what was occurring. He really wanted to hide these people. Only recently are you able to carry or pack heat in national parks. Very bizarre, right? I mean, if it's so safe, as we were being told, you're being sent in there with nothing really to protect yourself, but then people are missing. Doesn't really seem so safe. I have seen emails from park rangers. I have also seen chain emails from different park rangers that have no correlation. Could some of these not even be park rangers? Of course. Could all of them? Slim chance to none on that one. Could some of these emails, again, be made up? Of course. Could all of them, though? Slim chance to none. In these chain emails, what happens is certain rangers and areas accompany the special forces or military outlets that go out more or less to cull these feral people when the population is out of control and people's pets and people in general start missing. I have numerous people, including Jessica Jones, as well as many other people I work with, that have seen very strange military people decked out in high quality gear that either say nothing to them whatsoever, or when asked by Jessica and her team what they're doing out there, same thing you are, and they walk off. I do know that during the Dennis Martin case as well, the Green Beret were brought in to take a look as to what was occurring. There's numerous stories, though, which are hard to verify. Some say the Green Beret never said anything. They came back. That was it. Others said that they told the sheriff that they had found the problem and taken care of it, yet Dennis had been consumed. Okay, pretty gnarly stuff right here. While they cull these feral populations, they bring these rangers to make sure that they are aware of the areas to put up signs saying dangerous, whether landslides or road under construction, path not in use anymore. During the Civil War, many people ran off to the Smokies as well as the Appalachians to avoid having to participate in something they don't believe in. Now, keep in mind here, if we are going to make a really good comparison of what a feral person would be versus a domestic person, Mr. Barber's a big guy, but Mr. Barber is domesticated, meaning no different than your dog. Wolf is not domesticated. 9 out of 10 times, a wolf is going to absolutely obliterate a domesticated dog that is not trained to either hunt or participate in something. Myself, Mr. Barber, Robert Prevost, and Barb could all be walking, especially in these areas where you can't pack heater. These feral people that are specifically trying to survive, meaning our ancestors as well as indigenous cultures specialized in spears and bows, we're walking. What happens, just like with any other predator, you eliminate the largest force first. If a spear or arrow comes out of nowhere, makes it so Mr. Barber is no longer to participate, what happens now? 3 people. Then you're in absolutely terrified mode trying to figure out what's going on. These feral people start charging at you with potentially bone weapons, maybe even weapons that they've scavenged from other people. What's happening next? They're going to go for Mr. Prevost because he's also larger than myself. Now, are Barb and I standing our ground, or do we panic and run? Guess who's next? Probably Barb, and then that leaves myself, who's then isolated. What do? They take everything from you, and then you no longer exist because if unfortunately something per se was a little bit more darker, not much left to really find after this. Take whatever they need, throw them inside of the caves, maybe these dark canyon crevices. Do they live in there? Well, there goes all 4 of us, and we become a topic that we cover here.
You and I talked about this. I don't know of any incidents of feral people in Washington State. I've asked around. Nobody seems to have any information. And then, of course, when you just try to research it, I couldn't find anything. But we know how these things go. It has to be through, kind of a lot of times just through word of mouth. In Washington State, I think it is few and far between. But that's not to say that they aren't here. I think that a lot of the conditions would preclude someone from just living a feral lifestyle. You want to live off the grid, but you would better be prepared for it. There's also environmental issues here that I think would make perfect sense, that if the 4 of us are walking through the woods and we do go off the trails, I've seen what poor deforestation techniques, what they actually do to the forest floor. I just think that in itself it would be so dangerous. And I think that accounts for so many people that come up missing. Because if you fall down into some of these crevices and you don't even realize that they're there, I don't know how deep they could even go, underground. But what do you think about that, Brian?
Probably a little different than everybody else's. I put people into two different categories when we're talking feral. I think there's feral people, and I think there's wild people. To me, feral is no humans contact, socialization, or anything from birth, like the individual the Jungle Book is based on. You know, I think it was what was it, late 1800s they found him with a pack of wolves. Thought they quote unquote, they smoked the wolves out, quote unquote, rescue him, take him back, and because he runs on all fours, he barks, he sniffs, never speaking a word. So once you reach a certain point, I don't think you can come back from not having that education. So to me, that's feral. I think some of what might be happening out, you know, is wild people, who have decided to live off the grid, and like really off the grid. Not like some of these people that just escape society, people who decide to really live in nature. And I've only heard of a couple incidents and everything, the hours I spent digging, where there was confirmed wild people involved, which was an incident on the Oregon Trail where a hiker went into the woods. Name was Matt. It was in the 2000s. He was going to walk the entire trail. I forget how long it was. It wound up in Mount Shasta. So, speaking of Mount Shasta for LordeStarfox, he got a few days into it and he happened to come around a corner, and sitting on a boulder were two people in white, and thought it was kind of odd. They were really dingy, dirty, but a man and a woman just sitting there in white. He walks by, they're not saying anything. He kind of gives them a smile and says hi, keeps walking, and they just stare at him as if, staring through him. Long story short, he camps. He hears something outside his tent, goes outside and looks around, and his food pack's gone. And checks things out where his food pack was, and he finds boot prints. So it's like, okay, the people in white came in, stole his food, left. 3 days later, he winds up hearing more people. And keep in mind now, he's covered up almost 50 miles at this point. And it's pitch black. He's laying there and he hears people walking around his tent, grabs his knife, lays there, and then doesn't hear anything. So he thinks he's going to wake up and there's going to be people standing outside the tent, goes outside and it's the same boot prints. Freaks him out. So he goes down, finds a town, spends the night, gets his courage back, goes back up the trail because he's only got 100 miles out. It was a 1,500-mile hike. It was 3 nights into that. He had gone another 50 miles, way off track, camps, and this time he winds up putting sticks around his camp so he can, if anybody comes in, he hears a stick break. All of a sudden, a flashlight hits his tent, goes out, and he literally sees the light goes out and he sees somebody rushing him. He gets scared. He runs off. He hides under a log. Next thing he sees are two individuals searching the woods with this light. Luckily, they don't find him. He goes into town and luckily survives to tell the tale. Calls the police, tells them about it, keeps checking back, and they say, yeah, we have people being, stuff being stolen out of their camps, but we haven't had anybody terrorized like you. So I think there was a case of two wild people that was actually, confirmed. I tend to think if there is some things happening, I tend to think it would be more the wild, not the feral. And I'm with Barb. I think nature takes more than what people give it credit for. Just as an experience last weekend, I wound up on property that I haven't been on in a while, but fairly close to civilization. And I got lost for over 6 hours. If I hadn't had my GPS, and the one thing I was worried about was rolling and breaking my ankle. And if I had rolled and broke my ankle, nobody would have found me. So I know I spewed a lot. What do you think about that, Robert?
Absolutely. Whole lot to unpack with what everybody has said. Fantastic stuff. Um, I want to start off with, yes, there's definitely a difference between what we would call feral people, wild people, and just hermits who want to live out in the woods. We know quite well especially in the Smoky Mountains and up and down the Appalachians, which the Smoky Mountains are a part of, that there are definitely hermits that live out there. They have been accounted for years, especially by park rangers. Almost every park ranger who works up there and has been up there for more than 5 to 10 years will tell you about the hermits that live up there, and generally they're not a problem. They do speculate that there are feral people that live up in that area, as well as the Ozarks. The Ozarks are actually known for a lot of feral stuff, um, as well as Mackenzie River Valley, which is up in Canada. All of these areas are pretty well known for the idea or the lore of feral people. Um, Another one, talking about the Mount Shasta area, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens up in Mount Shasta and always has. It's kind of known as a nexus for really strange paranormal stuff. Mount Shasta, talking about the one case of the robot grandma, where the little boy disappeared for a period of time, was in a cave, came back, and started to talk to his grandma about how he didn't like the other grandma, and how she was very strange and very robotic. That comes from up in that area as well. The Dennis Martin case is a really interesting case. It's a terribly tragic case from the late 1960s, in where Dennis Martin disappears and is never found. And yes, there is what is believed to possibly be a family that eyewitnessed something in that area. You're talking about Harold Key and his family. Harold Key actually tried to clarify some of the facts that were blown out of proportion as far as his account. And from what he said, he believed it was a man. He didn't believe and never stated that it was like something like Sasquatch or Dogman or anything like that. He believed it was flat out a human being. And matter of fact, I think he even said that he was the man was wearing regular clothing. National parks. We Kenny mentioned national parks and about there's kind of always been this idea that it's been a secret place for cryptids, almost kind of like a reservation. And we kind of have this idea that these national parks, because there's so many strange things that happen there and so many disappearances, that there's kind of this secret area that's kept where cryptids are living, and Bigfoot, and we know about it and everything. And there's always a possibility of that, but we also have to look at it from the biological point of view. Because of the size of most of these national parks, a lot of them are the size of like states like Rhode Island and Maine and areas like that. If you've ever been to Yellowstone, it is massive. You can drive for hundreds of miles and you are still in Yellowstone. It covers 2 states, Wyoming and Montana. And so with something that size, that gives a lot of biologists the ability to go in and study certain groups, certain species. And when they know that these species frequent a certain area whenever they are going to be doing their mating or they're having their young, they will shut off those areas. That way it keeps people away, because these animals become more aggressive during those periods of time. Or you've got a species that is really on the brink of being endangered or extinct, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the best thing to do is to keep people out of the way, because people are not really good at following rules. You can watch any footage from Yellowstone and watch somebody who has the IQ of a doorknob out there trying to walk around with a grizzly bear, a black bear, or worse yet, a bison. So we kind of have to protect people from themselves sometimes. Something else I want to note is that all of your state parks and definitely your federal parks fall under the Department of the Interior. The Department of the Interior also controls your borders and things like that. And they actually have their own military force. It's not actually a part of the Department of Defense. They are completely separate, and they kind of have their own special forces and everything like that. You don't get to see them because they keep all that hidden for the most part. Let's see. So, looking at Theodore Roosevelt, who started, for the most part, our national parks and everything. He wrote in the book The Wilderness Hunter, talking about that encounter between two trappers, where one of the trappers got. And most of the time, we want to think that that's Bigfoot or Dogman or something like that. The truth is, in that book, he actually referred to the creature as a goblin. So we don't really know. There's not a real good depiction of what that creature looks like. When we look at feral people, we have to ask a question though too: what is the origin of these feral people? And are they feral people or are they wild people? Because feral people were indicating that at one time they were domesticated, if you want to call it that, and then at some point went wild again. So there's Native Americans who talk about tribes who were very sparse, who live out in the woods and don't live the way that other Native Americans lived at the time. They would live far out. So you've got Native American possible origins on some of this stuff. And then you can go all the way back to colonial times and pre-colonial times. We have to remember there were a lot of people who lived out in the wild. We had a lot of French, German trappers that were out there, Spanish. There's been a lot of people through here, and people just want to be left alone for the most part. And some people just have that inclination that they just want to go off in the middle of the woods and live there, which I can sympathize with. Sometimes I feel that exact same way. So yeah, there's a lot going on. And if you look at the Ozarks, one of the most famous stories is actually that of the Blue Man, who lived or was seen around Douglas County, Missouri back in the late 1800s. And they referred to him as the Blue Man because the first one who actually ran into this thing was, I think his name was Blue Saul. And he describes it as being kind of like a Neanderthal who carries a club and wears skins off in the forest. It's also been linked to Bigfoot, but there's a lot going on, whenever we look at all of this and we're looking at Sasquatch, Bigfoot, what they refer to as giants, other things like that. There's a lot of links with human beings who aren't necessarily domesticated or following the way that everybody else follows.
Great stuff to stir the pot a little bit. I'm going to give it back to everybody in just a second to see if any of these epic minds have some more things they would like to add to this topic before we let everybody have some nightmare fuel-based dreams tonight. First off, Robert hit on it, Neanderthals. That would make it even worse. Hate to break it to anybody. One Neanderthal would destroy our whole squad here quite easily, especially if we had nothing to defend ourselves. That's a whole nother level of insanity. I mean, the feral people are going to be crazy and attacking you, long fingernails, biting you. I do enjoy the differences between the wild and feral people. What I'm referring to a little bit more would be the wild people. Mr. Barber gave an absolutely epic explanation of this, pointing more towards in the direction of the wrong turn, the hills have eyes type individuals that would be involved in more of the nefarious stuff. Also, Barb, to give you a little bit of disturbed aspects, Nuxium, our master tracker, has seen signs of wild or feral people in California and also Washington, and said that he had no desire to go anywhere closer from the things he's heard some of his friends encounters. Pretty creepy right there. We did have what would be listed as a feral person, not wild, up here in Maine, considered the Maine hermit. Almost 20 plus years where he was all around Kennebunk in this resort and would break into people's cabins during the off season, take shampoo, towels and things. He had the same pair of glasses on that he had in high school when he decided to walk away. He didn't even know what year it was. Now he's integrated back into society. Pretty gnarly stuff right there for sure. Mr. Prevo also made another great reference of the blue people. Dennis Carroll, yes, he's the man. Very smart individual. Has a ton of research on the blue people in the Appalachians that basically are painting themselves to try to conceal themselves. Picture again, not even if we're dealing with Neanderthals, if we went into an area where someone or something that is completely accustomed to that area wanted to pursue us, we are not going to find them. Meaning, Survivor Man, when he has done some of his things, has come across indigenous and tribal people that he didn't even know were like around him. They legit snuck up on him because they wanted to know what the heck's going on, like this person doing survival stuff. He had no clue. You know how quickly something like that could occur and you could be disposed of? It's some pretty interesting stuff right there. That is more or less my good portion of the final thoughts as to what I have to really shed on the wild and feral people aspects, starting with Miss Hartman, throwing it to Mr. Prevo, and then, of course, Mr. Barber. What do you think, eh?
I'm still not sold. I am not gonna let that. And it could be like, oh, famous last words, Barb, but I'm still not gonna let that like dissuade me. I think that there are some compelling points, definitely, for there being feral or wild people. But I all right, so I mean, and let's get into like if you're talking about the hills have eyes kind of people, for there continuing to be like a generation of these people and then descending generations, you'd have to have a population. Well, we know that this sort of thing does happen, and then there's also major issues with congenital defects and things like that. It's not going to go well. So that's one of the things, and I feel like then you're really working with someone then that potentially it could affect their brain, and it's not all there. So I don't think that this is something that could continue for years and years. I also feel like they would want to be careful of how many people they did go after. Let's say, like, if they did come into a group of 4 of us and somebody had, even if you're not armed, most people, you'll carry bear spray if you're going out and, into any of these areas. And so one of us could take them down with the bear spray or with, or with, if we have like a weapon. I am interested in the report of the blue people. What do you think, Robert?
Definitely good points on all of that. When we get to talking about things like the hills have eyes, situation with the crazy stuff that's kind of blown out of proportion, that's actually been addressed pretty well by a couple of investigators, where they had lengthy conversations with a family in and around the Appalachians who are, and you really look at the mentally impaired whenever you're dealing with some of that. And definitely what Barb was talking about, that would stop something like that. And is that why sometimes people disappear, because they're bringing them in to forcibly keep this going on? We can speculate that that's possible. Are we saying that there's that's going on? That's possible. We're looking at similar situations that aren't happening with what we would call wild or feral people. I covered it with a lady who does a lot of TikToks talking about the Missouri. And these are people who were just, theoretically like you and me, as far as domesticated. And there's a lot of strange things going on as far as people disappearing. And a lot of that has to do with people you would pass on the street and you would never suspect, much less there being a group of feral people out in the woods or in the wilderness. Now, that's not saying there aren't feral people in the forest. That's always a possibility, but I'm kind of like Barb. I'm not real worried about it. First of all, I'm more worried about just regular people that you see out in the woods who you don't know what they're up to. That's like if I'm out in the forest and I'm doing an investigation, or I'm doing some hiking. The one thing I don't want to run into is another person, because you never know what their intent is. A bear, I know what a bear wants. I can read a bear. I can deal with a bear. I can deal with wolves, coyotes, a mountain lion, as opposed to a human that I'm going to run into out there. So you got to be careful around those. Talking about the blue people, there's actually a cave not very far from where I live, and I believe it's called the Whispering Cave. I'd have to get into it, and that's where a lot of stories of blue people come in. There's a lot of people who have tried to go deeper and deeper into this cave, because once upon a time there was someone who went deep into the cave and claimed that they found basically a whole tribe of blue people that lived down in there and had their own society and civilization. So there's a lot of that goes into subterranean humans living down and having their own cities, and you get into all of that. You can get up into the mountains of Tibet, and they talk about things like that. Interesting topic. Do I think that we're probably going to nail it down as that that there's feral people, wild people out there? It's always a possibility. And my final thing would be to say, be careful when you're out in the woods. Make sure somebody knows where you are. Have a GPS so that you yourself don't get lost. Make sure you know what you're doing and know what to do if you're out in the woods by yourself and you do get lost. Have some survival skills, and take some protection out there with you, whatever it might be. Just be careful, because the woods are a dangerous place, and a lot of people don't give it the respect that they need to give. Brian, what do you think, sir?
I think we're hitting on all the bases. I think probably some wild people, snatching a hiker or two probably happens. But do I think the numbers are that high? I mean, if we run with the 1,200 number, that would be what, 420 people a year? I think there'd be a little more uproar if they actually thought that. You might get your occasional, and sometimes people are forced into the wild just because of circumstances in their life. We had an incident here in Traverse City where there's a group of pretty much feral people who are relying on exogenous sources that got kicked out of a certain area, moved up behind our local Walmart. But do I think that's what's going on in the national forest? Once in a while. I honestly, I think there's more. I've seen more Bigfoot than I've seen feral people. So that would be my take on it.
Beautiful stuff by everybody, of course. Again, legends only speak legendary stuff. Preach. Do me a favor to the audience. Make sure to head over to Miss Hartman's page, No Drama Bigfoot. You're going to have the links in the good old description down below. As always, hit the like button on her page. Absorb all those videos and that great information. Make sure to head over to, of course, Monstrous, the podcast. You're going to have all Mr. Prevo's links up. You should recognize all three of these names. They consistently pop over on Midnight Lycanthropy. And of course, we have Camp Nightmare Fuel. Yet it's important to make sure to absorb all of Mr. Prevo's videos as well. Don't forget Bigfoot's Barber Shop. Yes, he's over here with Midnight Lycanthropy ×2 weekly. He's also over on Grizzlies Network, as well as his own. Those links are going to be up in the description as well. Final things I am going to leave everyone to think on, specifically the audience, is why no weapons in the national forest? Also, what smells worse than an uncleanly human being? So many times people report these smells of garbage, dirty butt cheeks. Well, could that not be the smell of nasty, unkept human beings? Thank you for hanging out with us tonight, Barb. I always do appreciate you.
Well, as always, thank you for having me. And it was great to do a show with you, Robert. And as usual, Brian and Kenny, great to do these things with both of you.
It's fantastic being here. I appreciate being asked to be on. As always, Kenny, fantastic stuff. Brian, You know, I love hanging and talking with you and Miss Barb. It was fantastic to sit and talk with you for a little bit, and I just appreciate being asked to come on here and hang out with y'all. So yeah, great. Hope to do it again.
Well, I appreciate being on too. It's always one of my favorite parts of the highlights of my week. So to be able to chat with Kenny a couple times a week, Robert, it was fun, and I appreciate being on your show the other night. And Barb, we definitely got some Bigfoot catching up to do. So thanks again for having me on and bringing me on as the sidekick.